It is 1949, and after a full decade of war, peace has finally returned to this world. All the ideologies, ambitions, and revanchism have been washed away by the tides of war, with the only thing left proudly standing being the very bedrock of civilizations. West versus East, Europe versus Asia, the two aspects of Eurasia finally united against the other. On the side of the West, it was the Germans who, after uniting their nation by blood and iron less than a century ago, united their continent with that same blood and iron, extinguishing the flame of syndicalism, and ending the Habsburgs' relic of an empire. On the side of the East, it was Japan, whose promise that the rising sun would shine over all of Asia was fulfilled with an iron will to the letter, bringing absolute order to China and India's chaos, sending the colonizers back to Europe, before fanatically marching west until an equal was met on old continent's door. That meeting happened following the First Eurasian War, during which both countries attacked one of their last rival on the old world, the mad Savinkovist Russia. But as empowering as rage can be, the two-front war was too much for it, definitely drowning its streams of revenge under the sounds of guns and war machines. The nation was then butchered into multiple parts. 5, 6, 7 in the Far East, the so-called supreme ruler of all Russia has been nothing but a corpse for years, with the mess he left behind being cleaned up by Tokyo, who used the opportunity to remake the region into its personal shipyard. With the Admiral's project being a failure without even actually starting, there was no one powerful enough to prevent Japan from turning the rest of Siberia into its own separate state after the war, providing much resources, and further complicate any dreams of unification from any sides. And finally, west of the heavily militarized border in the Urals, lay the decapitated head of the bear, Central Russia, which, as a trophy, was turned into the Kaiser's Second Reich. In reality a mere colony akin to Japan's. Life in these states is harsh, as most of the population, already impoverished by the war, now finds itself subject to an upper class made up of foreign nobles and oligarchs, as well as the beginning of Germanization and Japanization programs. This, however, wasn't enough for either of Eurasia's titans, each wanting to test their newfound hegemony against the other. They would start the Second Eurasian War. Just like the first, Russia would be the main battlefield, with the Urals being the main front lines. The difference being that there was no more third party to team up against. This would be a gigantic duel between Europe and Asia, that could only end with the complete annihilation of one of the two. Or at least, this was the ideal that floated within the minds of the ideologues and was displayed by the propagandists. As for the average man that had to fight it, it was a nightmare, a never-ending series of meat wave attacks that had to be joined or repelled, while enduring the murderous winter of a blasted land thousands of kilometers from home. Or worse for the Russians, within their own homes and killing your own brothers. Progress was incredibly slow, and each kilometer costly in blood in a way that would make even the survivors of the First Weltkrieg weep, as there were so many more bloody kilometers from them to the destination, be it Berlin or Tokyo. Only the power of the atom was able to break this stalemate, but this power was too much, as it was able to break not just this stalemate, but humanity itself. Eventually, a peace was signed between the two monarchs Yasuhito and Wilhelm III, establishing peace once more and beginning a trend of increasing collaboration between the two empires. An example of this was the agreement the two blocs signed with the Cairo Axis. It is a relatively lesser third bloc, which sphere of influence consists of the Middle East, and was originally founded as an alliance with the aim of finishing off the dying Ottoman Empire. After the sick man was put out of its misery, and the multiple nations under it were liberated, it turned its sights westwards, and with both German and Japanese support, launched a surprised attack against the French remnants in Western Africa, which still had their focus on the north for fear of a German invasion. The hastily put defense was worsened by numerous native revolts that eventually led to the collapse of the colonial state. The newly created states of Algeria and Tunisia joined Egypt, while the sub-Saharan nations joined the sphere. The Axis would yet expand after a new war with the revengeful Ottoman rump state, leading to a puppet government being put in place. Now extending from the shores of the Black Sea to the heart of the Sahara, the alliance was in a perfect position to serve as a buffer zone between the European and Asian giants. This was officialized by the Alexandria Accords, which would enshrine its neutrality toward the Reich Pact and the Sphere. National France gone, Canada found itself the last thread keeping the Entente away from the dustbin of history. But eventually, even it would end up being cut down by the samurai's sword, as it would launch an attack on Hawaii, dragging the declining empire against the rising one. The overextended Canadian fleet was unable to prevent the Japanese from landing in Vancouver, who started marching east. While they would struggle to quickly advance through the harsh Canadian terrain, they would nonetheless achieve victory after victory, culminating in the Battle of Winnipeg, which was the final blow to the King's army, and causing the British Empire in exile to surrender. This early surrender was caused by fear, not of Japan, but of the new, worse in their eyes, threat to their south. The American Civil War, and more particularly the rise of the KKK-controlled Constitutional American Republic, convinced many black Americans that they would never be truly free from oppression in this country. And so, when they eventually started a rebellion in the Deep South, it was not only to defeat the white supremacist regime, but also to carve out their own nation.